Välkomna till det här seminariet om handelspolitik. Mitt namn är Erik Pistolkors. Jag är biträdande chef på EU-kommissionens kontor i Stockholm. Mycket välkomna, det är kul att se så många här. Viktigt att alla känner att EU är en del för dem. Alla har en del i EU. Så vi ska bara meddela att vi är lite försenade. Vi väntar på ytterligare en talare som kommer alldeles strax, och då kommer vi börja. Och sen så vill jag också påminna om att det här seminariet kommer äga rum på engelska. Jag tror att det var klart i programmet, men det var lite otydligt. Så att, några minuter till så sätter vi igång. Tack så mycket. Okay, so we'll start again. Thank you very much. We're all here. Unfortunately, one of the panel participants was not able to be here today. As I said before, my name is Erik Pistolkors. I'm the deputy head of the Commission representation in Stockholm, and I shall lead you through the discussions this afternoon on Trump tariffs and Chinese dumping. How is the EU responding to the trade war? Very central issue for EU. And to help us with this, we have an eminent panel of three people who I shall introduce in the order they're standing. I've got Morten Blix, Chairman Almega Future Tech, Peter Dahlen, Managing Director of the American Chamber of Commerce in Sweden, last but not least, Anders Ahnli, Director General, National Board of Trade. So basically, to frame it, the EU's trade policy is based on openness and free trade. But the new global situation has changed the playing field. How should the EU address these new challenges while ensuring its supply of strategic resources? So starting off from basically a bit where we stand today. Does the EU have the right tools to effectively respond to today's trade challenges? Or are we in need of a more fundamental policy shift? Turning to Anders first, how should the EU navigate the tension between preserving an open rules-based trade system and the increasing push for strategic autonomy? Are we seeing a shift in the EU's core trade identity in response to global protectionism?
Thank you, Eric, very much for that question, and thank you for the invitation to be here today. It's a great privilege and pleasure. The National Board of Trade, as you said, is Sweden's Agency for International Trade, EU Internal Market and Trade Policy. And from that point of view, of course, we have pondered a lot on the question you just raised. And I think that our European Union, as a major trading entity, globally speaking, is well placed to face the tremendous difficulties that is now dominating in the global trading system. Why is that? Well, we see how the United States is de facto, if not de jure, leaving the World Trade Organization and the global rules-based trading system. Very sad, regrettable, but it's a fact. And our European Union, of course, has to react to what the Americans are doing. I think the Commission is doing a good job in trying to come to a solution, a agreement with the United States presently, and we'll see if that can be done before the 8th or 9th of July, which is the deadline. I hope so. But we also know that if it's not done, the EU will have to respond. There has to be retaliatory measures. The Commission has produced lists of that sort. One is already decided but paused, and a new list is on the way. That is, I think, a sensible thing to do, and it's a way of responding to the American unilateralism that is responsible. But I think also, continuing to try to answer your question, that we, of course, as a major trading entity, mustn't only react to what the Americans are now doing. We must also act to take into account our own interests. And we know that the American share of world trade is about 10 to 12%. The rest, 8 to 9% of world trade is done between countries that are not the United States. And from that point of view, I think the European Union, our European Union, have to continue to do whatever is possible to maintain as much as possible of the rule-based system that is still there. And that can be done through various means. One is to still work within the World Trade Organization to make sure that what is still functioning in that organization continues to function. And the second important step to take in that regard is to widen and improve the network of EU free trade agreements, which the Commission is also doing presently. In addition, we know that this situation will lead to a diversion of trade compared to the present situation. The Chinese goods that might be stopped from entering the US will find other outlets. That is a situation which has to be taken seriously. And I think the Commission has also met that challenge well, including by instituting this import surveillance mechanism that is now in place in Brussels. And there's much more to be said along these lines that I can maybe come back to in my next interventions. Thank you.
Thank you, Anders. Thank you very much. So according to you, the toolbox is filled with useful implements that deal with the issues. But again, at the same time, we've seen over the years, for instance, the Mercosur free trade agreement has taken 25 years really to come to fruition. So there are definitely spanners in the works. But again, as I said in the beginning, this new landscape is a major challenge. So turning to the issue of adapting to this landscape, what should the EU's priorities be if global trade continues its current confrontational path? How can the EU better support its businesses in adapting to the new trade landscape? And here is where the missing panel member would have been able to answer clearly on these issues. But Anders, you've kindly stepped in to field her questions. So the first one is again to you then. What do European businesses need most from EU trade policy today, especially when navigating growing geopolitical risks and increasing trade distortions? Are current instruments fit for purpose? Bit of a repetition, if you like, but specifically for businesses.
It's a question that somebody from the business community should ideally respond to. I am, of course, in contact with a number of companies, with Chamber of Commerces and with the Swedish Federation of Industries. And if I were to interpret what I hear, one important message from Swedish business is still that predictable rules that are constant over time is key, both globally and on the EU internal market. Difficult in this under the present situation, but there are also a fear of what might happen when other countries start subsidizing their businesses more, when the Chinese products are maybe coming in larger scales. Again, I think the Swedish business community want to support the Commission in doing exactly what I said in my first intervention, continue to press as to the extent possible for solutions under the rules-based system. The EU should not, as the United States, deviate from this. We are not doing it. The electrical vehicle situation is one example where I think the EU again has acted responsibly by instituted countervailing duties instead of just slapping 100% duties on the Chinese imports. So important message, stick to the rules-based system to the largest extent possible. Try to fix the US situation with as minimal loss and as minimal wounds as possible.
Thank you, Anders. All right, so basically, I mean, trade and competitiveness. We talked a lot about competitiveness yesterday here. This is one of the key issues for the EU. I mean, in extension, how can the EU continue to support Ukraine if it's not competitive? So a lot of focus on that aspect. But turning to Morten with your tech hat, how do you, from a European tech industry perspective, how is the current trade climate impacting innovation and again, crucially competitiveness, within the EU?
Well, let me start by saying that Almega, where I work now, represent 10,000 companies in the private sector, private service sector, and we organize about 500,000 people in Sweden. So, and why do I say this? Because I think that we cannot really treat this as one kind of crisis alone. It's not just trade. There are these spillovers from the trade war on goods and services, but there are other things going on also, and we don't have the luxury of treating them at different times. So one is the slow-moving tidal wave of demography, and the other one is digitalization, which is the key thing that I'm working on. And essentially, as we're entering this kind of time of tumultuous change, we're also seeing this transformation where goods are gradually being going into the service sector. So how the trade war affects services is also quite important. And the kind of message that I get from the people that we talk in the business community is what people want is predictability. If you don't have predictability, it's very hard to invest. And it's hard to invest either in the short or in the long term. So I think this is a little bit complementary to what you were saying, Anders. I mean, I agree with the point that you made about the rule-based international order. This is a part of predictability, but as the Commission is going into these negotiations, I think the strategy also needs to be taking into account what actions create uncertainty more in the short run or in the long run. So I think we need some guidance in order to go through these past difficult times. I'll stop there, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Before turning to Peter, basically again, the core issue is here, how can the EU balance trade goals with climate and sustainability ambitions? I mean, let's not forget the overarching priorities that we have. And in an increasing volatile trade landscape, we talked about the uncertainty, nobody likes uncertainty. How can the EU simultaneously manage these complex economic ties with both China and the US? And now we come to Peter. Given the unprecedented developments in the US trade policy, what are the key risks for EU-US trade relations moving forward? And can the EU and the US maintain a strong transatlantic economic partnership?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me, and I'm sorry I was a little bit late, but this is like an incredible forum of democracy, public policy, and politics, and conversations happen on the street everywhere you go, and it's such a wonderful thing. I think every democracy should have an Almadalen. But I'm really grateful to be here, and just for those of you who don't know, the American Chamber of Commerce, we're a completely independent idealförening established in Sweden, owned and run by our members. We do not represent the U.S. government, but instead we represent Swedish-U.S. trade and investment, and both Swedish companies in the U.S. and U.S. companies here in Sweden. So that's like the framework from which I view these conversations. So, yeah, to the first question, in terms of what are the key risks for EU-U.S. trade, I think, well, Anders highlighted the first, retaliatory tariffs. They're tariffs or taxes, and retaliatory tariffs will just damage companies in Sweden, in Europe, and the United States. And it's a pretty robust economy. We do a report every year with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the AmCham EU, two much larger chambers, but we contribute to their annual report on the transatlantic economy. And the 2025 report is, it highlights that it's a nearly $9 trillion economy and supports 16 million jobs, and we want to see that grow, not shrink. And then I think, well, both Anders and Morten have pointed out predictability. Of course, our businesses also want predictability and are proponents of rules-based trade. But one thing I would say in that regard is that where we are now, it is clear that we are in a different era. But that era, it predates the current presidency. If you go back to President Obama and even the first Bush administration, there were problems with the WTO from a U.S. perspective, and the pivot towards China was publicly announced by the Obama administration because the U.S. saw that as like their primary economic and, I guess, future military threat. So going forward, can the EU and the U.S. maintain a strong economic relationship? The answer to that question is yes, 100% yes. It's a rough period right now, but I think another clear line through our conversations with policymakers in the United States, in Brussels, and in Sweden, and our members across Europe and in the U.S. is that we need to reimagine the transatlantic relationship. The past is really important to getting us where we are today, but we need to see like a different future there. And once we get past this round of tariffs and potentially retaliatory tariffs, there is scope for agreement. I mean, Europe is moving in the right direction from our members' perspective in terms of competitiveness, and the more competitive Europe gets, the more close the EU gets to completing the single market, the better that will be for Europe, and it will shrink the GDP growth gap between the U.S. and Europe, and make Europe a more like equal partner with the U.S. And also in defense. I think the initiatives that Europe, the EU, and also individual NATO member states are taking to increase their defense spending will only strengthen the transatlantic relationship, because Europe will be a truer partner in the defense of the transatlantic area, allowing the U.S. to pivot east. So we're, ultimately optimistic, but it's a very challenging period.
Thank you, Peter. Absolutely. Okay. So listening to all three of you, basically the predictability or the elusiveness of predictability is a problem, obviously, but at the same time, the glass is half full rather than half empty. So optimism, I think, is the order of the day. Okay, looking ahead then, and this is a question to each of you in turn to answer. Where do we go from here? In your view, what should be the single most important priority for the EU in trade policy over the next year to effectively navigate these challenges? I think you've mentioned them in various orders, but if you could single out a few things, one each, for instance, for us. Thank you. Anybody who wants to start? You're closest.
Well, maybe I'll start. I think maybe the glass is not half full. I think it's kind of tilted, so it's a bit more concerning than the half full glass. Well, I would kind of emphasize the conjunction of reforms. We talked about trade policy, but I would also put to the questions maybe you had before on the single market. If we strengthen the single market, that would be an additional lever that I think is also going to be something that makes us more resilient when we're discussing trade. We're discussing trade now and in the years ahead when Trump maybe is no longer the president. And especially I would point the way to liberalization of the single market for services. I mean, most of you know that we had the single market for a long time. It's been very successful, but there's quite a significant distinction between what's happened to goods. So you've seen the intra-trade in goods in the EU has gone up like this fairly steadily over these past decades, whereas the trade in services has been sort of like flat. So on the competitive agenda that's been discussed at this time, I think this is a key moment to also think about the reforms that will strengthen the single market. This is Europe's chance. I mean, we have this threat of trade war, and the best time to do these kind of reforms, that's when there's a clear and significant threat to the competitiveness. So that would be my, that I would add to this conversation, that don't only think about trade policy, think of European competitiveness especially, and trade and services in particular.
Thank you, Morten. No, absolutely, that's crucial. I mean, I hear some shocking examples that if you live in a border town between Germany and France and you want to get a German electrician, you'll probably have to wait 3 weeks and fill in 15 different forms. So that's obviously something that needs to be looked at. Moving along to Peter, what would you be your single most important priority?
We've been having, well, over the course of the first day and a half of Almedal and our conversations in our venue have focused a lot on dual use, both in defense and healthcare, and ways that we can serve as a platform to bring together defense companies and civil sector companies to help both with actual defense and resilience when it comes to medicine. But I think there's a lot of ways to facilitate collaboration between the EU and the US on that. But if I had to pick a single most important one thing, it would be, and this is fresh in our mind because we just had a panel on it this morning on startups and scale-ups, is getting the EU-Commission to move forward with and implement the 28th regime they announced earlier this year, or in the startup scale-up strategy just last month, to ease burdens for companies that want to operate in all 27 member states. So to get to your point, Eric, about the German-French border problems, to overcome that, both from whether it's legal issues or talent mobility, or having to incorporate and have a subsidiary in each country to make it easier for a Swedish startup or scale-up to sell their services to all of Europe and to America and the rest of the world.
Thank you. Absolutely. No, that's clear. And I think both the Draghi and Letter report pointed to the need to tweak some of the issues in the single market, which again is the jewel in the crown of the EU, if you like. You're all nodding on that, and that's good. Okay, Anders. Last but not least, again, what would be your single most important priority?
Yeah, maybe if I may comment on the priorities we've heard first.
Certainly.
And I agree completely with Morten that one should not waste a crisis of the sort that we are presently having. We should use it to finally make the EU internal market perform better than presently. It is underperforming. We know that if only the decisions that we've already taken in terms of free movement of goods and services would be implemented by all member states, EU GDP would raise with up to 5 percentage points per year, 3 to 5 percentage points. Big change. So that is something we should do, and hopefully the heads of state and government at the European Council later this week will push us in that direction. We'll see. So that is one. And then, Peter, I wish you are right when you say that hopefully after the present difficult period, we will come back to a solid transatlantic economic relationship. And we will know more after the 8th, 9th of July. But I think we also have to be honest in this regard and state that the transatlantic link has been seriously wounded by the way the United States administration is now acting, and by the way the US president is apparently seeing our European Union. Confidence takes time to build up, and I think we have done that before. It is rapidly destroyed, and let's hope that it is not destroyed for a long time, and that we can overcome this issue that we have presently. And in saying that, I would very much like to see the United States and the European Union together trying to master some of the challenges that we have in the global economy presently, and not least the challenge that the nationalist, authoritarian, communist regime in Beijing is causing. We should do this together. But if the rift between us is maintained, I think it might be difficult, and that's very sad. Also in this respect, if I were to add one priority, I think we should also look at what our European Union is now trying to do in order to strengthen our economic security. This is a key component of present-day economic policy, given that we have a brutal war on our continent. We see conflicts in the Middle East. We see difficulties elsewhere. And key here, of course, is to strengthen this economic security. And the basis for that is a strong economy. And that means that we have to do still what we talked about earlier in terms of making sure that trade is strengthening our economy. We talk a lot about strategic autonomy, and that is not about protectionism. It is about resilience, and resilience is built by having several partners globally in terms of delivery of imports and exports, supply chains that are functioning with partners that you can rely upon. And I think to continue to build that resilience will be key for our European Union to strengthen our economy so we can defend our values, so that we can handle the green transition and the climate crisis. It's only by having a strong economy and a functioning global trading system that can be done. And also engaging in and become a better digital partner in the world.
Thank you, Anders. No, very many key issues there that you mentioned. Again, you know, the overarching threat to us is security, and everybody has to contribute. And trade and economy are integral parts in trying to address that challenge. Morten, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I wanted to come back to what Anders was saying, but kind of a slightly different angle. In my past, I also worked as an academic economist, and you know, if you go to the textbooks and you look up the chapter on international trade, it was the benefits of trade, comparative advantage, etc. And I think that as economists, we've believed this very strongly, but I think societies have not perhaps fully taken into account of this. Perhaps also the World Trade Organization has not had these perfect rules, have not been followed in the perfect way. So we kind of forgot exactly what these benefits are. We've had this great consumer goods coming into our countries at low cost. But maybe what will happen with if we see these calamities across trade and trading goods, and prices will rise and they may be scarce. Maybe we'll be reminded about the benefits of trade that were perhaps just seen as something abstract that we could take it for granted. So I think in here there's a kind of perhaps a longer term policy agenda, especially for the European Union, to think about once we're past these couple of difficult years, how would a positive reform agenda for trade look like? What it would look like for the World Trade Organization? When people have seen the bad things that happen when you do these things in an extreme way, maybe there's a willingness to kind of go back and repair the things that were not working as well as they could with, for example, the World Trade Organization. So perhaps a little glimmer of hope there as well.
Thank you. Yeah, no, hope is important. It's crucial. All right. Well, I think this brings us to the end of the actual formal part, if you like, the questions that I had for you. And I'm happy to see, looking at the time, normally when we do these exercises, we only have a couple of minutes left for questions from the audience, but now we have 15 minutes left. And so there's plenty of opportunities. Please don't be shy. I see quite a lot of young people here in the audience. I'm very happy to note that. So I encourage you as well. No question is too simple or too banal, so please go ahead. The audience, the panel will be will be ready to field your questions. I will as well. So here we are. We have a mic. Go ahead. If you can say your name and where you come from, that'll be also helpful. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Teresa Küchler. I work for the Swedish Svenska Dagbladet newspaper. I'm based in Brussels. I wanted to ask you a bit of a long question, but there is a trade agreement between the EU and China. It's signed and it's sealed, but it's not yet delivered and it's not implemented but it's not held up by a new view on China. It's held up by the European Parliament due to concerns over human rights violations in China or something. I mean, I'm not really following your line on this brand new view on China. EU member states are trading like there's no tomorrow with China. They're trading more and more every day. We have new car factories popping up in China, European car makers. We have the French are exporting camembert cheeses and champagne like never before to China. So I don't know, is this some kind of good cop, bad cop kind of strategy? What the European Commission is sharpening rhetorics against China while member states are trading like there's no tomorrow with China. And also, what are you doing against this hold-up with the European Parliament? Sorry, that was a really messy question, but did you understand my line of reasoning? It's the European Parliament that is blocking the trade agreement, not a new view on China.
No, absolutely. Thank you for that. Okay, a very sort of crucial question, which I'm probably going to make nobody else want to ask anything after that. But anyway, we should have left you to the end. All right, no, it's fair enough. I mean, the issue of political will, it's crucial to all these things, and it's murky waters in some ways. But Anders, maybe you feel confident to field this one.
Well, I don't know if I can answer, and I don't know what agreement you are referring to. It might be the investment agreement that was concluded a couple of years ago, and that is it's politically not possible to get it into play presently, and that's a fact, I think. I hope nothing that I said before could be interpreted as though I would like to stop all trade with China. Not at all. But we have to make sure that we trade with China in a way that doesn't make us vulnerable. And we have seen that China is a country that possesses both the ability and willingness to use trade as a political weapon. And there we have to be careful. We have, talking about the toolbox, provide ourselves with this anti-coercion instrument when China blocked trade with Lithuania. So we are prepared to meet such a situation, and hopefully we will only have to meet it in relation to China and not in relation to the United States, but that also remains to be seen. Of course, a lot of legitimate trade is going on and should be going on. It's often argued that it was a mistake to let China into the World Trade Organization. I was one of the officials then that apparently were naive. We thought that putting China as a member of the WTO would change China. Didn't happen. That was wrong. But I'm still confident that stopping trade, disconnecting China from the trading system would be a grave mistake and would probably only increase and speed up a even worse situation in the Southeast Asian part of the world. So legitimate trade will have to continue. We should trade a lot. There should be investment, and there are investments, including Swedish investment in China, but it should be done in a way that doesn't compromise our security.
Thank you, Anders. Are you satisfied? So journalists are never satisfied fully. They shouldn't be either. Okay, let me see any other arms, please. Anybody? Yes. Starting at the end there, maybe.
Hello. Yeah, my name is Matthias. I come from Stockholm, and I'm here with the Liberal Youth League of Sweden. I was just wondering, can you not see it as a positive thing in some way that China is subsidizing electric cars? I understand that you want to protect, for example, European jobs, but is it not good in some way that they want to pay for our green transition here?
Okay, well, that was a good question. Morten, how do you feel about trying to reply to that?
I think it's a more question for these guys.
Is it? Okay.
Well, it's not an issue that we talk about a lot with our member companies here in Sweden, but I think if you look at the U.S. approach to China overall, from across the last 4 administrations at least, it's not been about like cutting off China. Even if you look at the House of Representatives, they have a select committee on China, but it's the select committee on the communist government of China. So there's a distinction to be made that is like shared bipartisanly in the US, that China, we do not want to cut off China, nor do we want to nor does I think US policy try to stifle their innovation in those areas. But I think one of the lessons from COVID was that we need to diversify and secure supply chains, either onshoring them or friendshoring them, and that goes like across the board, whether you're talking about personal protective equipment like masks or batteries for the green transition. The EU and the US need to be able to make their own batteries to compete in the green transition, because otherwise you give a non-market actor the power to just sort of turn it off.
Anders?
Very briefly, just to add a few words on your very good question, Matthias, because you are right. From a purely economic point of view, of course, it would be good if the Chinese would pay for our green transition, and if we could get as inexpensive products as possible. But the world isn't as simple as that, and there are political concerns that also have to be taken into account. And the problem, of course, is that a country like China is seeking to dominate various fields of activity in the economy. Could be solar cells, what have you, the things you have on the roof, for instance, one example. And I think it's fair to have a system in which companies in Europe and the United States can be given some relief when we can clearly see that prices are subsidized or dumped in a way that is not in accordance with the WTO rules. Economically, you can argue against it, but politically, I think it is necessary to uphold the faith in the system, the belief in the system, to get popular support for a system like the global trading system. You have to make choices, and you have to deviate from the pure economic results in a way.
Thank you. Faith and belief in the system, crucial issues. Thank you for your question. We look forward to seeing you as a young EU official in 10 years. I think there was another question from a young lady on the same row. Microphone is coming. There we go.
My name is Elise, and I'm here with the Foreign Affairs Association. And I was wondering, how do you view the future relationship with the US in regards to, on the one part, their criticism of the EU's common agricultural policy, calling it too protectionist, and on the other part, the importance of agricultural stability that we've seen, not the least with the war in Ukraine and the strengthened relationship between the EU and Ukraine?
Thank you. Another excellent question. I'm very encouraged by your level of knowledge, the young people. You old guys, you've got to learn here now. Anyway, I think this one's for you, Peter. The US was mentioned, of course, the common agricultural policy is a big thing, Ukraine, membership, etc. Not asking you to answer that part, but maybe on a general note, I know that the US has been critical of the CAP over the years. Not quite as critical as some South American countries, mind you, but still.
But could you repeat the part about the Ukraine?
Because we've seen during the war how important agricultural stability has been in Ukraine, not being able to play the part in agricultural export and trade that they had before the war, and seeing the strengthened relationship between the EU and Ukraine, thinking that the CAP and its what the US would call protectionist measures will be even more important coming in the future. How the relationship between the EU and the US regarding agriculture could develop.
I don't think I can speak to that particular Ukraine part of it.
I'll deal with that one.
Okay,
but
great.
Do the US bit
But
first.
overall, like the agricultural issues the US has with the EU, I mean, they're long-standing. One of the things I've taken to do, like quite often in settings like this over the last several months, is to point out the fact that even though the tone is not good, the issues that the US has with the EU are long-standing. So if you look at the national trade estimate, which Congress has required the U.S. Trade Representative to report every year, if you look at them for the last 10, 15, 20 years, you'll see, like, I think these days it's about 30, 35 pages, but the issues are with the EU, they're quite similar. And I'm sure that the EU has similar things vis-a-vis the U.S. But I think one of my contacts in DC who's got a long experience doing trade negotiations, he said something interesting to me when I met him a couple of weeks ago. He said, it's important that we have empathy. I mean, empathy is important for us in our personal lives, but it's also important for us in our work lives, and it's important for us in our geopolitical lives. So there's a lot of pressure in the United States on any administration, whether it's the current one or a Democratic one, to get access to Europe for American agricultural goods. And so we have to move past like stories like chlorine dipped chicken, which isn't the way most chickens are treated in the United States these days, but different approaches to regulation. Just open the market to U.S. goods in areas that are sensitive, and the U.S. needs to open markets to goods that are also sensitive to our friends and allies, of which the EU is both friends and allies. And, you know, maybe they won't sell, but they need to be open to it. So, yeah, I think that's all I have on agricultural issues.
Thank you. And on the Ukraine, EU-Ukraine agricultural angle, I think you put your finger very much squarely on the sore point. It's basically the elephant in the room for the accession negotiations for Ukraine, now how to deal with this thing. I mean, and again, in extension, and not only talking about Ukraine, I mean, as the EU expands and more member states want to come in, we're looking at how to reform the whole workings of the union, including the common agricultural policy. It's going to be a thorny issue, not an easy one to deal with as strong lobbyists, especially in the agricultural field, but it's something that we will have to address. All right. Yes, please.
Tord Hermansson, Global Business Gate. First, I want to comment on Matthias' question. I think it was excellent. And I think China was served the opportunity to sell cheaper cars on a plate due to the European car manufacturing industry not being too quick on the electrification transformation. So having my question is, all these things going on in the financial and the trade market, do you already now foresee or can predict that we will change things in how we do trade within the European inner market or with the US, China, or the process steps or things in the business models or way we deal with things that we already now can predict will change the future of trading. So maybe it's a bit blurry question, but
no, fair enough. No, okay. Well, don't change it if it isn't broken. But I think we talked about these things earlier. That the new landscape is a challenge. So, again, anybody wants to quickly? We're running out of time. But
very quickly. I mean, I think it's going to boost the certification of the economy because it's much harder to put a tax or tariffs on services. It's been going on for a long time, and I think it's going to give it another boost, and especially for digital services.
Okay, thank you. We're right up. Yes, time for one more quick question there.
Hi, my name is Christina Larsson. I work for Volvo Cars, based in Brussels. Well, it's interesting. A lot of the discussion has been about our sector, and I will definitely, on the sideline, comment on your question later. But now, for the panel, a question about batteries. Obviously, an issue that my company and our sector is having a lot of challenges around in Europe right now. And we know China is dominating the supply chain and the technology. What do you think about the possibility of bringing this technology to Europe with Chinese help? In China, for a very long time, European and American companies have been forced to enter joint ventures to be able to invest in China. Can we have a similar model for investments in Europe in the battery supply chain industry? Thanks.
Okay, batteries. Anybody know something about batteries? Anders, do you? Quick one.
It's a very good question, and one that is a bit difficult to answer from the National Board of Trade point of view. I note that there was a big possible investment in this sector in the Sundsvall region, which was not given, which was not pursued due to the fact that we are now assessing incoming foreign direct investments. It's not an easy question to answer from that point of view. I note also that a number of Swedish companies share Volvo Cars' view in terms of opening up more for Chinese engagement in this sector, since China is the technological leader in the field.
Thank you, Anders. I think this brings our session to an end. Thank you for listening. Thank you for attending. And a round of applause for our eminent panel. Thank you.